Welcome to the Quantum Guide Show, where you will find interesting guests and discussions about cutting-edge topics to assist you on your journey. The Quantum Guide Show is ideally suited to the newly awakened and for those who feel isolated by their newfound beliefs. The mind, body, and spirit thrive when we have a mission, and there is no greater mission than to become the change that we wish to see in the world. So hit the like button, subscribe to my YouTube, Odyssey, and Telegram channels, and share this show with your friends. Welcome back to the Quantum Guide Show. In episode 107, I'm happy to introduce you to Rebecca Sheppard and Jane Scharf, who have something to share with us about the treason that we are witnessing here in Canada. And they've got the proof. I'm going to let Rebecca and Jane introduce themselves and share a bit about their background. But first, I want to welcome everyone to the show, and I want to welcome Rebecca and Jane. Welcome to the Quantum Guide Show. So if you could just start off by telling us a little bit of your background and how you came to be involved in the work that you're doing now.
Thank you so much for having us. It's great to be here. My name is Rebecca Sheppard. I am, unlike Jane, I'm a pretty newbie activist. I don't even know if that's really what I don't even know. I'm not even sure what we're doing anymore. We're trying to save the planet. How's that? I got involved with the movement in July of 2020. I was always aware that what the media was portraying and the government was portraying was not actual truth. But I kind of stayed out of it for a little while. And then once they mandated us wearing face muzzles, that's when I decided, okay, that's just not going to happen in my world. Marched myself into Queen's Park, met some of the folks down there. And then I originally started with Hugs Over Mass, moved on, branched off, started Stand4Thee, that again, 2020. And here we are today. And I'm a project manager with 20 years project management experience. And it's very interesting that project management skills actually translate very well into what I'm doing with Stand4Thee. And then along came Jane Scharf. And Jane Scharf has been an absolute, Jane is just a breadth of knowledge and information. And I think Jane and I work really well together. And now what we focus on is empowering people with information and education so that they can take control of their own lives. I really believe that this whole situation that we're in is an opportunity for us to find our own power and authority. And I like to think that that's what we help people to do, is to find their own authority so that they can stand up for themselves and so that they can sit in their own power. Over to you, Jane.
Absolutely.
Oh, okay.
Absolutely.
A hard act to follow. My name is Jane Scharf, and my background that lends itself to the current situation is an advocate, I would say, and primarily in poverty, disability, those kinds of issues. I was around when Pierre Elliott Trudeau was stomping around this country trying to set it up for a communist takeover. And even in the day, I did recognize the attack on our democracy. It's a topic for another day, but he did some pretty horrific stuff. And some of that direct experience lends itself to an understanding of what's going on now. It was sort of like the background work, so I can recognize, where they're trying to get in. Primarily, his biggest achievement for the communist agenda was the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, because Section 1 allows the government to override your rights if they think they have a justifiable reason, which puts the responsibility on you to file a constitutional challenge. And then maybe, 10 years later, you may or may not have your right respected, depending on whatever that judge, who's appointed and paid for by the government, decides based on their discretion. Okay, so that's not a good framework for a right. We had common law in Canada. United States, the same kind of thing where the court has to abide by previous legal decisions. And then we had the Canadian Bill of Rights, 1960, which is still there, and it's still got all of the power and strength that it ever had. So it was pretty much sitting under the rug before we started, and we dragged it out, dusted it off, and waved it around, and it's been well received and understanding within the freedom movement. And primarily what we're wanting people to understand is that this is still a democratic country. You still have rights, in spite of the abuses that you see with the COVID, the violations. Those were not legal, and we're getting a variety of responses from the court based on those violations of our rights, depending on how it's presented in court. If you bring in the charter, you lose. If you bring in common law or the bill, you have a high, and I'm not saying automatic, but you have a high chance of winning or dropping charges. That's what we're seeing mostly with the bill. And common law is coming through in the labor. It's coming just straight up with common law. No bill, no charter, just labor common law. And there's been some really good decisions around the vax situation. So anyways, what we want people to know that we do have a constitution. It's solid. It respects civil liberties. The Bill of Rights articulates, tried to codify those rights that have been set out. And primarily, if we focus on holding those to account who are not respecting the law, all of that stuff that went on with the convoy was illegal. The Emergency Act was brought in by Mark Mendocino, one minister. It's supposed to be a vote in the cabinet. Okay, right there. That's a treasonous act right there, because they're undermining the sovereignty of Canada through violence, using violence. It's the very definition of treason. Also, there was no grounds to bring it in as per the necessary grounds described. As well, the preamble says that they're not allowed to violate your rights when in their plans, in their emergency plans, and they in fact severely overrode the truckers' rights. Their freedom of speech. Sorry, somebody keeps calling me incessantly. Sorry. Freedom of speech, assembly, association, press, and property primarily, and excessive use of force used in everybody's face. And then they illegally set up an inquiry, which was also supposed to be established by the cabinet, and Prime Minister Trudeau himself initiated it, and Bill Blair selected everybody that was going to participate in it, like his favorite lawyers and his favorite judge to be the commissioner and so on. And we got the result that we expected when we saw that process happening. Like, they investigated themselves and found out they didn't do anything wrong. But I am very pleased by the reaction of particularly the freedom movement. They're laughing at them, and meme after meme expressing that we're not fooled. We know this is just a lark, and we're not done. And I will let Rebecca take over from now. I know I've made a long statement. So for our next phases and stages. Yeah.
Yeah, and I just want to echo what Jane had said, that I think the response, I mean, I tend to sometimes be a very optimistic person. And so when I heard Brulot's words, it was like, oh, but I mean, I knew, I knew that was going to be the outcome. But I think that for the most part, the response has not been, oh, we're screwed. Oh my God, we have no rights. It's, oh, yeah, right. Yeah, right. You're telling me, and if you watch the Public Order Emergency Commission, and if you heard the testimonies, there was nothing that was said that came close to the endangerment of people's lives. The only endangerment was the lack of compliance, right? They were in malls without wearing masks. Well, and they were blocking a road. Actually, no, the police blocked the road, and there's evidence of that. So it was a relief, I think, to see that for the most part, people are not panicking over the response. People are really feeling that they can create change and wanting to participate in creating the change, because it's a slim narrative. It's a very slim narrative. And we know that, well, what did happen in Ottawa was aggressive and people were hurt. And I also just want to make note that one of the things that has happened that's very frustrating, and Jane, I don't know if you saw this, that the Ottawa police apologized to the people of Ottawa, but didn't apologize to the people where they broke their hands, they dislocated their shoulders, they stepped on them, they stomped on them, they did all of those things. That was not apologized. They didn't apologize for that. I found that frustrating. And by the way, I do not sit in the mindset of Black Lives Matter or Antifa that the police are our enemy. I don't believe that to be the case at all. And I know, and I think most of us I think any of us who were there, and any of us who really understand what happened, it's clear that the police are not our enemy, because they had to bust those police in from all across Canada and potentially from other countries, because they didn't have enough in Ontario.
And bring in the Emergency Act.
That's
to force
right.
them into it, because they had 3 weeks that they could have shut it down under the criminal code had they intended to, and they did not.
Yeah. And so we see that, again, despite what has happened in small pockets of situations, which I know those have happened, I'm not blind to that, we see that in general, the police are not against the people. The military didn't step in. So we've got a small group of people causing problems for Canadians and all of people, the whole globe. Well, it's not a globe, the earth, the planet, whatever. We're all going through the same thing. But in reality, they don't have the buy-in. They don't have the legal framework, at least not here in Canada. They do not have the legal framework that they need to move forward with their plans. They tried it, and even there's a lot of failures with the Emergencies Act too. Number one, what was the poll that you saw, Jane? 70% of Canadians.
One of them was 69. One of them was 70.
And these are mainstream media.
This was done back in the day, or in the day of the Emergency Act being invoked, and it was given to the House of Commons. It was presented to them.
Was that
and
the
there was
special
one
joint
done
committee?
Again. Yeah. Well, they must have got it as well. But they also did another one last week, and they got the same results.
Yeah. Yeah.
One was 69, one was 70. So basically the same results.
And I'm missing, sorry, the point. It's 69 or 70%
that are against. We're against the Emergencies Act being invoked.
Okay.
They felt it was excessive, and they just didn't think it was necessary. And I think when even if there was, because if you look at the Emergencies Act, when you look at the grounds, it has to be a national emergency, and it has to be that there's a serious public health issue, or not public health, sorry, a risk. People could be harmed. Like typically it's reserved for some kind of, a war situation, or where the borders are being compromised, where there's a catastrophe of some kind. Well, this was bouncy castles and bonfires on Wellington.
And the only risk that they conveyed was from the horn honking, which had already stopped after week 1. And somebody testified that they had post-traumatic stress disorder and hearing loss from horns honking. So, and then nothing after that. There was nothing after that. The businesses were closed voluntarily. In fact, the city pressured them into closing. They didn't need to close. The ones that stayed open were happy to have the business and happy to, be part of everything that was going on. There was no need to shut the businesses whatsoever.
No, they didn't. And some of them were making record profits. They didn't want to close, not record profits, but after these ridiculous shutdowns that they'd had. And this is what people don't understand. When you close an office tower, you're not just closing down that building. The coffee shops, the retailers, the restaurants, they all suffer. Everybody in the surrounding area suffers. They need those people there. So there was a lot of business owners in the downtown Ottawa area that when the truckers came along, first of all, we want to go shopping too. You get a little bored when you're protesting, and go for somewhere to eat, and go somewhere where you're allowed to eat, because remember at that time we weren't allowed to eat in a restaurant unless we showed our passport, right? And so there were business owners. There was a restaurant, and she did very well. The Tim Hortons down at is it Bank or Slater?
Gloucester and Bank.
Wow, those guys probably had the best month they've ever had in their history. And there was another retailer who we spoke with. They were so happy that the truckers were there because they were making money again. And it was the city that came by and said, "You have to close." They threatened them, they coerced them, they intimidated them, they told them, all kinds of stories that weren't real or true. So there was a lot of that, and it just wasn't reasonable. But when you look at the claims being made that it was justified, again, we have the part that's missing, and this is where it got watered down. First of all, nobody was actually laying out what the Emergencies Act itself states. In Part 3, it's very clear that it needs to meet there's like a criteria. That was never discussed. They just said, what's that, Jane?
I'll go look it up when you're talking.
Yeah, it was always just, the threshold was met. The threshold was met. When the testimonies from all sides were coming in, this was stuff that was like, guys, these are bylaw infractions. These are literally, and let's also note that the bylaw officers were not issuing bylaw tickets. So if you are breaking the law, if you're committing a provincial offense, because that's what it is, and you're not being told, hey, you can't do that, because nobody was told. We were there. Nobody ever said, hey, can you move your truck? That never happened. What did happen was 2 court injunctions that were ordered. And what those injunctions also stated, one was for horn honking, and I forget what the second one was.
I know what it was for. It was for them to be able to enforce
the bylaws.
For parking and so on.
Parking, that's right. That's when they started issuing the tickets.
Yeah.
But it also said in those 2 injunctions that the protesters were free to continue as long as it remained peaceful and lawful. Yep. So that it was 2 judges. Both judges ruled in their injunctions that, hey, listen, just like, knock off the horn honking and carry on. And the second one was, okay, fine. Don't illegally park, but carry on. So before the Emergencies Act was even declared, there were 2 different judges and 2 different injunctions that had declared in their ruling that you could continue as long as it remained lawful and peaceful.
I'll read you that preamble.
Yes.
That it fits here. This is the Emergency Act. In the preamble, 3rd paragraph, it says, and whereas the governor and council, in taking such special temporary measures, would be subject to the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms and the Canadian Bill of Rights, and must have regard to the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, particularly with respect to those fundamental rights that are not to be limited or abridged, even in a national emergency. And they would be your basics, right? Life, liberty, security of person, enjoyment of property, the right to freedom of speech, assembly and association and press. Those are your fundamental.
And also to be treated equally, right?
Yeah.
Equal treatment and protection of the law.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's a whole. Can you also? Yes,
sorry,
please.
go ahead. Finish.
I would like Jane to read paragraph 3 of the act that talks about the criteria for declaring, like the threshold for declaring the emergency, where it talks about the harm to the public.
That was paragraph 3 I just read, so it must be a different paragraph.
That was the preamble. It's section 3.
Section 3.
Section
Okay,
3,
just a second.
Because this is the part that they didn't talk about. And this is the part that anyone who doesn't watch CNN and believe the nonsense, but people who were there and people who had the common sense to realize that the media was portraying things dishonestly, shocker, there's no way that this criteria was met. Do you have it?
Okay,
Penny?
for the purposes of this act, a national emergency is an urgent and critical situation of a temporary nature that A, seriously endangers the lives, health, and safety of the Canadians, and is of such proportions or nature as to exceed the capacity of authority of a province to deal with it. So we have a criminal code, I forget which section number.
63 or something. I can look it up.
Okay, where they're allowed to shut a protest down if it's not peaceful. Mm-hmm. And then the second criteria, B, is seriously threatens the ability of the government of Canada to preserve the sovereignty, security, and territorial integrity of Canada. So I don't believe, and our CSIS said it wasn't a national security.
Well,
and
all of the
police said they didn't need CSIS. They had it under control. And there was actually a deal that the police had brokered with the so-called leadership, but it was being enacted. I believe it was 102 trucks were moved in 2 days, and they were continuing to want to move the trucks from Rideau and Sussex, and the police asked them to line up against the wall and get ready to move. And then what's her name? Janice has an email stating that the federal government disagrees with them opening the barriers to let those trucks onto Wellington. So the federal government, and also the federal government, is not supposed to direct the police in these matters. They're supposed to allow extraordinary powers for the police to deal with an emergency. They're not supposed to be directing. And in this case, they were directing. There's also evidence that Mayor Watson met with Trudeau.
Yes,
and
he was meeting with the cabinet. Yes.
Yeah.
He admitted that in the Public Order Emergency Commission. Yeah. And he also stated that he never met with the police, yet he met with the federal cabinet ministers.
Yeah.
And he said it would be inappropriate for me to meet with the police, but totally appropriate for a mayor to meet with the cabinet ministers.
Yeah.
And we know that Watson is part of the WEF. So
they didn't want that to resolve. Like what it would have looked like at the end of the day if the police had finished executing their deal that they had was for an additional, I don't know the number, but I think it was 50 trucks more or something like that onto Wellington, right in front of Parliament, and the others would be relocated to truck stops outside the city. I think there was one at exit 88, and then there was one in Arnprior and one on Bank Street. Yeah. And there was an agreement for that. There didn't seem to be any resistance. Like the toughest nuts to crack were the ones at Wellington and Rideau, and they were all in line with it. They moved. They didn't resist. They went, sure, we'll do it. And they got all
everybody wanted on Wellington. That's where the whole time the truckers wanted to get down there.
And they were blocked. The police wouldn't lift the barriers.
Yeah. So what we have is, and I'm just going to pull up our site super quick, just so and by the way, all of this information is on the homepage of our site. So just some of just to kind of recap where they fell flat on actually having the requirements to invoke the act was Section 3, which Jane just read about the threshold or the criteria. And then the other part is that Section 17(1) of the Public Order Emergency states that they require a vote from the cabinet. Yet there's no evidence that vote took place. So it without further evidence, one can conclude that it was a directive that came from the federal cabinet without having a vote.
Yeah, because that's what it says in the order. It says on advice from Mark Mendocino. not as advice of the cabinet.
And Jane actually we were at the Public Order Emergency Commission, and Jane had asked or stated to Paul Rouleau and everybody in the room that that it did not go through the cabinet. What did you say that day, Jane? What was it that you brought forward?
I said that given the fact that they did not vote in cabinet, the act was brought in illegally. So an examination of whether there was sufficient grounds was moot, because if they shouldn't have done it at all, doesn't matter if there's grounds or not grounds or whatever, it was not valid. And that's and what else did I say? Oh yeah, I mentioned that the emergency what was it, the Public Order Emergency Commission itself was illegally established because Justin Trudeau recommended it. So it said order in council on recommendation of Justin Trudeau, and it should say under recommendation of the cabinet. And the Joint Committee, however, was established lawfully. So Rebecca and I several times, wanting to check our work and check it again, tried to find the emergency order itself under on the government site. It's not
in the orders and council section, or on the there's a section on the government website, orders and council.
In council,
and, in there you can search.
You can see the ones that they made after it was called.
Yes,
and those ones can say Trudeau, Mendocino, Blair, or whoever, because once an emergency is called, that's what it is in effect. It's the authority, rare authority, to make orders in council without going through Parliament. That's what an emergency is. That's what the legal,
that's the purpose, so they can get shit done because they need to. It's an emergency.
Exactly. And quickly. So those were there. Those were there. And the order for the Joint Committee was there. It went through the House and the Senate, and it was properly passed. But the order for the inquiry was not there, and the order itself was not there. You can find the order online. If you go on Google, you can find it, but not on the government site. It's not there.
Yeah,
because
so it's very interesting.
Because it didn't go through the proper procedures.
That's right.
And Rebecca and I have been saying this since day one. We started saying this literally day one, because we knew there hadn't been a vote. And I don't know how many times, maybe hundreds of times between the two of us. And we've written it, and it's on your site, and it's been on our Zooms. And I said it to the inquiry itself in public directly to the commissioner. So if I was wrong, they would have said, excuse me, that vote took place on February, whatever, and it's at this location, you can confirm. Okay. Nobody says that, because it's not there.
And Jane also confronted Rouleau and called him did you call him a liberal old boy?
No, I said he's in, what was it? The camp. He's in the liberal camp, so to speak. Yeah. So, and he said, well, I was appointed by the government. And I said, was that the liberal government? And he says, I don't have to answer your questions or whatever. I'm not here to answer your questions.
And Rouleau's got now, and I had somebody laugh at me. Oh, you don't know what you're talking about. They said if he had ties to Trudeau, they wouldn't have appointed him. I was like, what planet are you on? So Paul Rouleau was a lawyer in Montreal at the same time as Pierre Elliott. Pierre Elliott is obviously, well, he's passed away, but he was older than Rouleau. Montreal is not that big, okay? It doesn't matter where you are. If you're a lawyer in a city working in the same capacity, you're going to know each other, first of all. Secondly, he ended up a partner at Heenan Blakey in Montreal, which is now defunct. That was Pierre Trudeau's law firm. You don't get a partner if you don't know people in the law firm. This is a family. This is not just, hey, here's this new guy over here. Let's bring him in as a partner. They know each other. These things are incestuous. That's just how it is. So there's that. if you look
And
at,
he actually got two judge appointments through the Liberals.
I
One
was
through
just about,
Chrétien and the other one
yes,
through Paul Martin. And
that's
actually
right.
a recent one by Trudeau Jr. And Dave just found that one the other day, 2017,
That's right.
a new appointment,
That's right.
2017. Yeah.
And and then there's also the question of who the heck is Suzette Rouleau? Suzette
Yeah,
was
that
Suzette.
one's a little sketchy because
I
if
agree.
Pierre was Paul's brother, there's too much of an age
No,
difference.
no, 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 not Paul's brother. No, no. Suzette is Pierre's brother. Suzette used to be Suzette Trudeau.
Yeah,
But she was old. She would have been 100 if she was like she
yeah,
was,
yeah,
yeah, she'd be 100 and something if she was alive today. So the question is, just who is she to the Rouleaus? And that's what can't be
yeah,
answered.
yeah. True
So
that.
I don't know what the connection is, but it would seem that when you have, first of all, politics is everyone's family, lawyers, everyone's family. They're all connected. Listen, I work in ad agencies, and that's connected. You know, industries are connected. So it is, and also he was connected to. He's been connected with every Liberal Party since he's been in politics. So
Yeah.
it is ridiculous to say that this man is unbiased and impartial. If it was just some random dude,
He
you
even
know,
says, "I'm a puppet."
yes, he said it himself.
Yeah.
He said it himself.
The body thrives when it has a mission, and there is no greater mission than to become the change we wish to see in the world. Sometimes, though, we need a little help from consultation and support services. Have you discovered that this world is not what you thought it was? Have recent global events awakened you and leave you feeling unsettled? Do you feel isolated with your not-so-popular newfound beliefs? Would you like to learn to thrive in this new state of awareness? It is a big shock to wake up and find that the old familiar world is gone, and it can be disturbing to go down the various rabbit holes only to find that the information is difficult to digest, and few people are willing to talk openly about it. You are not a conspiracy theorist. You are awakening, and once you find your way through it, there are many blessings on the other side. My name is Karen Holton, and I offer vital services that may be just what you need, and support for your journey into the weird and wonderful. Check out my Awakening Support and Ascension consultation, created to support individuals with their chosen alternative realities and lifestyles, health and recovery, and spiritual adventures. For more details, check out the various vital services found on my website, and be assured that I have found personal success with every category featured. My website is www.KarenHoltonHealthCoach.com. That's KarenHolton healthcoach.com.
So these are the things that we know. We know that they didn't meet the threshold. We also know that there was only that Alberta, which was one of the provinces affected, had solved the problem before the act was invoked.
Yes.
BC, the blockade there was actually caused by the RCMP. They were instructed in the morning, and I have the CBSA announcement that was, I'm not sure where that was supposed to go, but it was a CBI, because we have our Trudeau for Treason incident report on our site. All of this is in the incident report. And in the morning, there was a post that came out from the border services saying that the RCMP had shut down the border. This was the day of the emergency being invoked, which was invoked at 8 p.m. So in the morning, they started closing borders themselves to validate the invocation of the act because, hey, look, they shut down the borders. And then we know that Windsor had been open the week before because there was an injunction. February 11th, I think it was, Jane.
Yeah.
So The Coutts border had been cleared, and the Alberta, this is the thing that's really disappointing, is that at the beginning of the Public Order Emergency Commission, when they were doing their, I don't know what they called it, their introduction, the Alberta government and the Saskatchewan government, the representatives from those provinces got on there and said, well, we're here to understand why the rights of Albertans and Saskatchewans were affected by this order. We want answers. And then they never asked anything else. It's all smoke and mirrors. But they admitted, by the way, they stated that the Coutts border had been cleared before the Emergencies Act. We know that Windsor had been cleared through the injunction before the Emergencies Act. BC wasn't really a problem. Emerson, we don't know. But even if it was Emerson, that's one border, and that's not a very high trade corridor that may have or may not have been closed. We don't know. But if you have pockets of protests, how is the protest in Coutts impacting everybody else in Canada? How is the protest in Ottawa with bouncy castles?
And it has to be beyond the police capacity.
And the police had the capacity, which I was trying to get the criminal code, I believe is 63 bracket 1, where it states that if a protest becomes tumultuous, then they can shut it down. Well, why didn't they do that? And we know why they didn't do that, because this was a setup. And if you watch the Public Order Emergency Commission, I mean, Jane, the plan, remember the plan? Oh, that plan? No, this plan, no, that plan. No, we didn't have a plan. I never saw the plan. No, I adjusted that plan. Did you look at the plan? No, he saw the plan. No, he signed off on the plan. What, this plan? No, not that plan.
Yep.
You're gonna tell me, again, remember, project manager here, you're going to tell me that you have a national crisis, but you don't have a single plan, and nobody.
Well, BJ Ditcher there. I just saw a video
Victor?
this week. Victor, yeah.
Dictor, yeah.
Dictor, yeah. He put out a tweet saying there was no deal the day after the deal was struck. And then he said, well, I didn't know, and that's why, and all this. And now there's minutes of the Freedom Corp meeting, and it shows that he was attending by phone and that he voted. And then a story about that is, oh, well, it wasn't clear, and they didn't call me back. And I said, well, you would think you would call one of them back and find out if there was a deal, if that was the topic of the conversation, and you didn't hear it all before you make a public statement. So that sounds really sketchy too.
Well, remember, Jane, when we were helping Bridget Belton at the Public Order Emergency Commission, which, by the way, we didn't sign a confidentiality agreement, so I can say whatever I want. And guess what I happened to read through was Keith Wilson's notes, basically his documented daily summary of what was happening.
Oh, you should tell him who Keith Wilson is.
Oh, yes, Keith Wilson is the lawyer from Alberta who was working under the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms. I have another name for them, but I'll keep that to myself. And
he's a King's Counsel.
King's
he
Counsel.
Used to work for the federal government.
That's right. A lot of these people used to work for the federal government. A lot of these self-appointed leaders worked for the federal government. But Keith Wilson, they absolutely made the deal. I saw his notes. And he talked about writing the deal himself with inputs from others. And I can't, my brain is overloaded with information. I don't want to get into the particulars because I can't remember right now. But they absolutely made the deal. He was discussing writing the deal that before it was released. These are his notes.
We have,
and I just want to clarify that. Just
to
1
support
second.
What you're saying, Rebecca,
just,
we have So go ahead.
Just one quick question or answer. The notes that were provided from Keith, they seem like notes that would be kept for invoicing purposes. So these weren't like notes that he drafted for the POEC. Again, being self-employed, these were notes like, this is what I did today. This is the work that I accomplished today. And I wanted to state that, because it wasn't an afterthought. These were like, it was his like a journal. Sorry, Jane, go ahead. Sorry, Jane.
I forget the point I was going to make. Keith, oh yeah, we had texts that were sent from the police, and we knew it was for sure because you had the number for the police officer. What's his name again?
Chris? Oh, yes, Chris, and Feng Li.
Yeah, Yeah. So Chris was sending text to a liaison person. What's her name? Sandy Sable.
Oh, right, Sandy.
Yeah, and they were giving instructions to the truckers on Rideau and Sussex to get in line, or to or line up against the wall, was primarily what they were saying to do. And this was happening, and they did. They lined up against the wall. And then when it came to moving the barriers, the police didn't move the barriers. And we're thinking it's because the federal government said, no, we don't want this deal. We want to bring in the Emergency Act.
Yes, and actually, one of the truckers that I spoke to, who was at the Rideau, Sussex area, when they were asked to move, as Jane mentioned, they got ready to go. They actually moved their trucks. And Bożena is one of the Polish ladies who was with the adopted trucker. When she went down there, she noticed the trucks had moved, and she had a conversation with them. And what had happened is they started to move, and then the police said, "Nope, it's too late, can't go now." And the truckers were mad because they wanted to move. The intention was not to disrupt people. The intention was for them to be in one spot. The police on day one stopped them.
And then our wonderful Poobah, self-appointed Poobah, Keith Wilson, testified that the truckers on Rideau and Sussex did not want to move. They were refusing to move. And then the lawyer said to him, that was questioning him, said, "At that point, did you anticipate that they would bring in the Emergency Act?" And Keith Wilson said, yes, I did. So in other words, he was giving false testimony to support the need, or not, I don't even think that would even be the need, but some essence of a need. Okay, if there's a large group of trucks that are blocking the roads and so on, and that they don't want to move.
Let's also acknowledge that Keith committed perjury on the stand, and we submitted an affidavit. So I'm not going to get into the details, but it's really getting back down to the fundamental flaws of this Public Order Emergency Commission and the lack of integrity. Keith Wilson committed perjury about an event that I was at, and I actually have the evidence. I did a live of the event. And it's quite damning, because what he is saying is that we were trying to overthrow the police, that we were attempting to arrest the police at Coventry Road. And that is not at all. By force.
Yeah.
And that would have
military style, he said.
That we were military personnel.
Yeah.
We were ex-military personnel. And this would have given way to invoking the Emergencies Act. This came from Keith Wilson, who was supposed to be on our side. I mean, who asked him to come is beyond me. And so I wrote an affidavit and I provided a link to the evidence to say that is not at all what happened. This is what happened. And what happened, Jane? Instead of them saying, "Holy shit, thanks for telling us the truth," instead, Brandon Miller attacked Jane, attacked us for trying to share the truth. So this is what we're dealing with. We're dealing with, not only do we have
Brandon Miller, another JCCF.
That's right. Another
live one.
Yeah. So we have, what has happened in Canada is infiltration in all facets. We see it in the school system, we see it in the unions, we see it in the government, in the healthcare, it's everywhere. But then it's even more, what's the word I'm looking for? Pervasive. Because here we have it in the Public Order Emergency Commission with the people who are supposed to be on our side. And instead of saying, like, listen, if it was, Jane and I are good friends here, and Jane and I have been working together for a long time. But if Jane went on the stand and committed perjury like that, that's not acceptable. And Jane wouldn't let me do that. Just because we're friends and we like each other, the truth is what's important here. And so for anyone to say, "Oh, well, no, guys, absolutely not." The allowing people to continue to lie because you don't want to let go of the notion
that was
they're wrong.
derogatory lies as well, inflammatory, derogatory lies that gave them some fuel to support this false narrative that there was blockade and occupation.
Yeah.
And they also manipulated James Bowder too, to say that there was blockades, and they weren't blockades. They did a protest at CBC. They didn't block anything, but they called it a blockade. So he testified, against our advice. he used the word blockade, which is there's no legal blockade. A blockade is illegal, and it means you're blocking the flow of traffic, either pedestrian or vehicles, from their normal course of activity. And it wasn't a blockade; it was a protest. They had protest signs, and they had an issue with CBC, false news,
as
and all
people
that.
rightfully should. Our tax dollars are funding these organizations for the as the government says, misinformation and disinformation.
Yeah, but somebody was encouraging him. Oh no, go ahead. You use the word blockade. That's
but it's
fine.
lawful. It's lawful.
Yeah.
So I know the clock is ticking, and because I'm always like, I want to give people things to do. I want people to know, like, listen, not all hope is lost. We are not a communist country. We are not China. We can still create change. We can still make the world a better place. So, Jane, let's talk about the stuff that people can do, right?
Mhm.
Well, you know what? I was talking with Janice Curry and her aunt the other day, and her aunt reminded me of when the Ford government said that the parks were going to be shut down because of COVID, and the mothers organized quickly, and their attitude was no flipping, flying, freaking way are you shutting those parks? We're going to smash those fences down or whatever we have to do. 24 hours later, Ford went, oh, parks open. 24
They said,
hours.
yeah, get the chain cutters. Let's go.
Yeah, there you go. So, I mean, all we have to do is have the perspective that this is our country. This is a free country. It's a democratic country. There's laws against what these executives are doing, and they're not above the law. The RCMP have full authority and right and duty to arrest them. So what we need to say is no flip and flying friggin' way are we going to accept an executive of the government that commits treason. Get them in jail. And give them a trial, of course. And if they get found guilty, life in prison.
Yeah.
With no cake and file.
I got a question for you guys.
Yes.
And, I didn't watch the whole commission, but I watched quite a bit. And of course, I was very intimately involved with what went on a year ago in Ottawa because I had friends. So I had all this firsthand footage and evidence and, I knew all that. But what kind of made me wonder if we even have a country anymore is when Justin Trudeau said he took his marching orders from Joe Biden, that Joe Biden had called him and said, you need to end this, you need to end it now. And on the flip side of that, I want to say that obviously that means that movement was one of the most successful movements in all history, that it's
not done.
And if it was, that's great. But I guess my point is, can you guys bring it any clarity? What the FUCK that if the Prime Minister of Canada is taking his orders from the President of the United States, and even that's doubtful if he is.
I say they're not taking orders from they're not taking.
Is that
they're taking,
treason? But he said it.
That's
It came
treason.
out of his mouth.
That's treason.
Can you guys?
Yes.
That's treason.
I just really
That's
want to
treason.
know about that.
He's admitting treason. Yeah, that's treason. And that could go on the list of evidence against him, of course. And they're all claiming to be members of the World Economic Forum.
Yeah.
And if you look at the mandate of we're not players in the process. It's business, NGOs, blah, blah, blah. Not the people.
No.
The government, meaning the executive of the government, but not as representatives of the people, as executives, as whoever runs the power in that country at that time. And their mandate is to bring in the UN agenda primarily through digital. That's not my interpretation. That's what they say on their website.
Yeah.
So that, to me, if somebody signs on to that, that's treasonous, because it means that they're following, accepting instructions and following a mandate of a foreign entity.
That's
right. So they're admitting it when they put their name on that list. That to me is confirmation of treason, and every single one of them that signs on to that should be arrested and put in jail.
Yep.
And just for
Absolutely.
clarification, so what I'm understanding that you gals are saying is all is not lost, regardless of the shenanigans that there's going on from the WEF down to North America and Canada and everything else, even though they're lying on the stand and they're perjuring themselves and they're illegally bringing in emergent and all this other shit does basically two things. One is it doesn't absolve them from the law, which still exists in Canada, and that's what you gals are doing, is bringing that out and giving people an avenue where they can do something, not just sit at home wringing their hands. They can actually get out
Exactly.
and consult
And
you guys
also
and
we've
do
made
something. It's not all lost. And all of those governments and officials and everything else are accountable under the law, and the law is coming.
And we've made a lot of inroads. People don't even realize how close we came to completely going to the under. For example, shutting of the gatherings. I don't know if you know what that was at the beginning. If you had more than X number of people, I think they started with 100, 75, 25, and 5. The police were supposed to bash in with no warrant and remove everybody from the location, lock the location down, and not allow a return until they believed it was safe. So not even any, procedure that you could count on. They didn't do that in Ontario. The regional police, they would only do it with court order. So they did do it a few times, but only with court order. And Adamson Barbecue was not Toronto police. It was private. It was off-duty police officers hired as private security by Public Health and John Tory. They even gave Adam Skelly a bill, $187,000 for the policing for 3 days, 250 police. So where they wanted to go, they haven't got there. Digital is not working to what they want. I mean, they've still got their fingers all over the place and pushing little things, but the hospitals, for example, and their hospitals are pretty infiltrated and pretty, but regardless, the Civic Hospital, actually, I should start with the General Hospital. I had a shoulder replacement and I had to go back for visits. And one day I went to walk in and there was like 4 or 5 staff with little machines, and you were supposed to do your QR thing. And I'm like, oh, I'm not doing that. And they went, okay. And I just went in, but I went back maybe a few weeks later, and it had gone down to one that was against the wall and nobody was telling you or pressuring you. It just like, basically, if you want to do it. And I just walk right by. Civic Hospital, they have one in the emergency, but that's not the through entrance. You're not supposed to go through there. You're supposed to go through another side door for the public. They have only one QR machine, and it's in the emergency, and it's on the wall, and there's a sign that says, what did they call it? Screening here or something like that. But nobody was doing it, and no staff was enforcing it. And when you went in the public door, there wasn't even a machine. You went in and there was a counter with nobody working at the counter, a big stack of masks, but no machine to do the QR. You just walk in and away you go. And in the Montfort Hospital, there isn't even one. There isn't even one sitting there. Like and they're all in Ottawa. These are all Ottawa hospitals. So that is far off of what they expected it to be at this time. Also, and Rebecca has done a lot of work, a lot more than I did with the border issues. And look what's going on there. Sweet bugger all. The ArriveCan is been rejected. And that was going to be a big, be in there, or a big whatever bonus for them. And it's falling apart. The guaranteed annual income, we played a big part in that.
Oh, that's, yeah.
That one died. And now we're involving with other people that are doing the gun grab, and the
and the amendments to Bill C-21 got scrapped.
Yes.
G4 and G46, which was a list of 300 firearms, not weapons, firearms.
Yep.
That was scrapped.
Good.
Yep.
And then there's Bill C-293, which is really hideous. It's supposed to be changing laws to prepare for the next emergency or something, but it's really gross.
Pandemic preparedness. specifically.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Contact
And then,
tracing.
and then C11. That's another one.
Yeah.
And
And they're
that one,
losing grounds.
oh,
See,
and the cities,
yes,
that, what is it
15-minute
called?
cities, 15
Oh
minute
yeah,
cities.
people are going same as the mothers with the fence. They're going, no, flip and fly, freaking way are they going to confine me in a 5 mile? And there's people all organizing and all kinds of memes all over the place.
Yes.
Like they've got
they've
some
already-
real barriers, and we have our Bill of Rights, so we have the law on our side. The charter is even tanking people in our movement. At least they know that the charter is a piece of garbage, and now. And it was already not this summer, but last summer, I got asked to speak in Toronto, and I spoke about the Bill of Rights. And Galati was asked to speak as well, and he got on after me. And I thought, oh yeah, he's probably going to slam the bill. He doesn't mention the bill, and he didn't mention the charter. And I thought, that's interesting that Galati doesn't mention the charter. And the next week, same thing. He did a whole big speech, doesn't mention the charter. Also, if you look on his website, all his advertising doesn't mention the charter. He says Constitution and whatever, but charter has become a what do you call it? Like trigger word. And people know too. That's what I'm so pleased and excited about. When people are triggered, when they hear charter, they're giving very, accurate rendition of the problems. The loopholes, and they
People
know
are educated. People are educated on it.
Exactly. I love that. Karen Selleck, the lawyer Karen Selleck, went after us about the bill, and she had a website, and I happened to look on the website, and people I didn't know were saying Section 26 and blah 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 blah, and I'm like, whoa! I couldn't believe it.
The word got out.
She pretty much shut up, and same as Susan Cole, she's pretty well shut up.
Well, Suzanne Coles was just she wanted to get into politics.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to talk about a couple of things. Like these are really easy things that anyone can do. And I'm looking at my screen because there's a lot. There has been some fear mongering, and I have both Jay and I zero tolerance for this. Oh my God, we're done. It's like I tell people, then just lay down and die because no point in doing anything. Right?
I say, well, you need to look for a bunker then.
Yeah. Yeah. So these are pretty easy things. So, I always think start from the ground up, right? So we know with the 15-minute cities, we know this is something that's been planned. I know Toronto's been planning it since 2004. You know what? Call your counselor. Say, hey, listen, what about this 15-minute city? Are you on side? Just know where they stand. And if they're not on side, what can we do about it? Yeah. What can I do? Because I said it in the beginning, I'm going to say it again. I really believe that what we're going through is an exercise of it's realization and actualization. What is wrong with me today? Anyway, self-realization, empowerment. I'm going to stick with those words because I can say them. But call people. Call your counselor, call your MPP, call your MP. Find out where they are in this because maybe they're not aligned too. And if they're not aligned, again, how can I help? What can I do? Have those conversations.
And when they get enough, they do pay attention because that's what happened with Bill C-233, the guaranteed annual income. Soon as the public were getting on it. And to give you hope too, there's a short story about Nazi Germany and the useless eater policy. They brought it in subversively like they're doing here. And they killed, I believe it was 7,000 disabled persons. And then they decided to make it an official policy. So they wrote it up and they were going to, inject it into the official process. And a bishop, seeing that, gave a sermon on Sunday condemning it and condemning the Nazis for having such an unchristian, immoral policy, blah, blah, blah. And somebody wrote it down as he spoke it, that they would have a policy that was going to be for killing disabled persons. And they were promoting it as humane. They were saying they don't have a good quality of life, so we're going to do them a favor by killing them. So anyway, they wanted to kill this bishop. Yeah, they wanted to kill the bishop initially, but then they decided, well, maybe we better not because they'll make a martyr out of him and other people will take his place and take up the cause. So let's just withdraw the policy. In Nazi Germany, at the height of their power, public opinion ruled.
It still does. It absolutely still does. Yeah.
Yeah, and
And
we can do
that's,
it way better here and way more easily here because we still have a lot of freedom and a lot of opportunity to pass the messages and support each other's actions and so on.
and that's where I was going to go next is, enough of this being afraid. It's time to talk. Just, hey, so what about this treason, eh? Start the conversation, because I think that there's been a big shift. I think that there was a shift during the convoy that woke a lot of people up. There's been, since the Emergencies Act, that woke people up. Now with the public order emergency, the ruling on that, there's just been a lot of things that have been waking people up. The 15-minute cities is a big one. So start talking to people. Don't be afraid. If they're not aligned, then fine, move on, But
A big change happened since 2020 when the Lavalin affair was going on. What's her name? Rowboat. What was her full name?
I don't remember.
The one that was the Attorney General of Canada, and she put out all of her evidence that Trudeau committed interfering with a criminal investigation. So everybody and anybody in the entire country could see that beyond a shadow of a doubt. Plus, the conflict of interest minister found him guilty of conflict of interest by doing that. And yet people did not respond. Even in the freedom movement, they were just, I don't know, it just didn't resonate. They just couldn't get their mind around that their prime
Nobody
minister
cared, to be
is
quite honest.
criminal.
Yeah,
I don't
people
know if
weren't.
they didn't care or if they just didn't
I
have
think they didn't understand it.
Oh, maybe. But
Yeah.
now it's a different story.
Yeah.
Now you say it and everybody, like in this movement at least, they're like, and outside the system as well, outside
I would say
our
absolutely,
yeah.
yes.
People are interested and they're receptive, and you see lots and lots of posts and even, like, I think really good memes, like the what was my favorite one, the trader on the gator. I love that one. But anyways, lots of people are resonating with this concept, and they're prepared to say it publicly, which I'm really pleased about. Yeah.
And then, so just, in terms of having those conversations, we've got lots of information on our website. So take a couple of minutes to read through it, to educate yourself so you can talk about it confidently and have those conversations. It's all on the homepage, stand4thee.ca. We also have handouts. If you're going to go to a protest, guys, add some value to it. Value add, right? We've got a whole bunch of stuff that you can download on our site. Under resources, you'll find a link to protest flyers. Download them, print them, take them with you, hand them out to people, start the conversation. We have actions that you can take on our site. There's a declaration declaration of treason where we're asking MPs, the police, the senators to get off your ass and hold these people accountable for what they've done.
And a postcard.
A postcard. Yeah, we've got, again, the downloadable flyers, the postcards to the house. We do our Stand4Thee calls every Friday night, and of course, this is a big topic of conversation because there's nothing more important right now. If these guys get away with this, then we will be lawless. So that's why we've got to push really hard on this. And we are working on, Jane, what are we working on?
We're working on Trudeau for Treason trip across Canada, and we've got people with different topics, going from Ottawa to the East Coast and from Ottawa to the West Coast, discussing how the treason relates to medical, the gun grab, farming, and trucking, of course, and potentially some other topics, but those are the ones that we've identified so far. And we're going to be launching that at some unannounced date in April. And we're hoping that people will come and listen when they pass through their town or their city, and assist them in just disseminating the information that they're going to bring to you, and so on. Yeah.
Wonderful.
So we don't have to sit by and wait for someone to save us. We are the heroes in this story, and we can work together to create change. Absolutely. We've been doing it all along. We just don't realize.
Yeah.
And remember those mothers with their kids in the park. So the same thing. will take the same attitude. Like, no,
Yeah.
this is against the
Yeah.
law. This is a democratic country. We're free. We are the sovereign.
Right.
Trudeau is not the sovereign. The Queen or the King now is not the sovereign. In a democracy, the people are the sovereign.
Yeah.
The government is a function that the sovereign creates, and the sovereign determines how it operates. And the sovereign is going to assert that committing treason is not consistent with the function and the conditions that the function is supposed to operate under, and jail is the consequence.
Yes, absolutely.
Wonderful, wonderful. So here we've talked a bit about, what's been going on. We've talked about what you can do about it. We've offered you lots of resources. I'm sure you could reach out to Rebecca or Jane if you have any questions, if you want to get involved. You might even want to go out and poster your city or your town when these folks are coming through to let everybody else know about it. And so there's lots we can do. And even though all this illegal stuff is going on and lies and bullshit, that doesn't mean that they're winning. In fact, I think the more of this they do, the more it's proving that they're in the wrong. And I wanted to just give you a quick observation as we close out. Okay, when I was watching the different programs that were exposing different aspects of the commission that the Emergency Act Commission that recently happened. And you know what I noticed overwhelmingly is that the people who were getting up to testify against the trucker movement, it was almost like they had no confidence, like they know they're lying. They're just getting their marching orders from the next level up, the Klaus Schwabites. I call them the Schwabites, right? And they're just and they know they're in the wrong. And so they're lying. And it's almost like they are absolutely paranoid. So what they did is they projected their own paranoid delusion on what might have happened in the future, not what happened, not fact-based at all. And they acted as though this future paranoid scenario was a real thing, and then they acted on it. But there's no evidence whatsoever that there was legal grounds for that.
And
Jane, go ahead.
Representation, they represented Peace Corp, which did not represent the truckers. They were self-appointed, and as a rule, the truckers said, "Oh, they're
Freedom
a bunch
Corp.
of clowns."
Freedom Corp.
Yeah, and they didn't support them. They tried to get them to all sign on an agreement that they were all part of this, and I believe the total was 67 signed on to it. So that's not even close to.
And
to
those
50%.
67 are now on the lawsuits because they signed that piece of paper.
Exactly. So they must have turned it over to them.
Yeah.
So the truckers themselves were not represented on the commission, and neither was members of the public that were not truckers. You had members of the public who were against the truckers. Okay, they were represented, but why didn't they represent people who were not direct? They could have been from another city or whatever. They could have come on by Zoom, representing. And so instead, they handpicked who and how, and they had all kinds of stupid rules, like the too much detail for now, but confidentiality agreement that would really control, even in the future, what they could say about what happened. And as well, they had this thing where if you wanted your own lawyer to be questioning you, you had to ask for standing. Okay. Well, the woman that I represented didn't get asked to speak until August. And the rule was the request to have standing had to be made in by June, with no exceptions. So I didn't get to question her, and nor did we get to question anybody else. Even if they mentioned her, even if they gave a derogatory statement about her, we could not question them. But JCCF got to question all of their own clients as well. They got to question everybody else that testified. Isn't that cute?
Wow. Yeah. No, but it's all becoming ever so obvious. And the more they ramp it up, shows the more desperate they are, because they're losing and they've got nothing. And we're the ones that have the power, and we're standing together And I'm so glad the two of you could come on the show today. The links are going to be in the description below. And if any of you have any questions, please do contact Stand4Thee, and I'm sure Rebecca and Jane and many of their volunteers will be there to help. And also, I want to invite Jane and Rebecca to come back when you've got something new or something you want, people to know. Please do add us to your media list. Come back and let the viewers know what's going on, because the whole world is watching Canada right now
100%.
very, very closely.
Thank you so much for having us. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you.
Me too. Me too.
Thank you so much.
Me too. Thank you. And we'll see you all next week on the Quantum Guide Show. Bye-bye.
Oh, hold on. Jane?
Oh, hashtag, we got this.
Thank you.
We do. Thank you for joining us on the Quantum Guide Show. Become the change that you wish to see in the world. Subscribe to my YouTube, Odyssey, and Telegram channels. Like this video and share it with your friends. You can also find the Quantum Guide Show and my other podcast called Aliens and Astrology on the Forbidden Knowledge News Network. That's www.forbiddenknowledge.news. And while you're at it, check out my website, www.karenholtonhealthcoach.com, where you will find some amazing products and services and an abundance of free resources to help you with your journey. All of the links are in the description below. And in the meantime, until we see you next week, keep up the good work.
Splendor in endlessness puts all my inner strife to rest. For time gives birth to hurriedness. It all makes sense, well, more or less. And the sages put me to their test. Heart and soul, I do my best to find the answers to my quest. I wonder and I